One of the funniest things about humans is that we can hang out with someone for basically our entire lives and still not know who they are. And just to avoid any kind of ambiguity, I am talking about someone for our literal entire lives. We cannot help but be hanging out with this particular person all of the time. Show of hands, anyone in here who thinks that they know themselves. If you just raised your hand just there, I really appreciate the gesture, but this is a YouTube video and I cannot actually see. But also I'm going to press X to doubt, because even people who have done quite a bit of soul searching eventually realize that, oh shit, I'm actually a pretty complicated person that changes over time. Now, it is unfortunately true that self-discovery is something that usually only the financially privileged have access to. In the middle and, upper classes, it has essentially become a rite of passage into adulthood. You know, the whole doing a year abroad thing after high school or university? That's generally something that poor people don't get to do, and this is a problem. But it's not really the most pressing problem that poor people have, and also not the subject of this video. And you can argue that what happens during this year of self-discovery and like the ancillary time periods is mainly being influenced by novel things that weren't in your life before, and that is certainly part of the deal of what is happening. But that is just how you develop as a person. You step out of your comfort zone, you breathe some different air, and then you adjust and grow. Self-discovery is something that happens in tandem with this because you need a sort of contrast to what's been happening all your life to realize that this is actually a fact about yourself. Something very strange, unusual, unique, and interesting about yourself may have been staring you in the face for many years, but you never really noticed it because it was always there and there was never anything else to come into conflict with it. I personally believe that self-discovery and self-knowledge are unequivocally good things, and I wish that more people had access to the kinds of processes that allowed you to engage in that, because it immensely increases your quality of life by giving you more agency over yourself. But I wouldn't be making this video if I didn't think that there was something fundamentally broken about the idea of finding yourself. Here's how we do it, right? We take young people, or rather people who have just legally become adults, and we put them in a different place, at least mentally, usually also physically, and then after a set period of time, they return. This doesn't need to be a year abroad, by the way. Getting a university education, for instance, going out to live on your own is also a very essential process of self-discovery, and not just because you are exposed to a lot of new knowledge and a lot of new ideas, because that's the kind of culture that universities generally seek to cultivate. It's very different from what we do in school, where everyone is basically on the same path of the assembly line, and then at the end somebody goes around and sticks a bunch of labels on that person to assess the quality of the finished end product. Then during self-discovery, we give these products a little bit of time to be unique and different and develop their own flavors that deviate from those central universal quality standards. But this does not become the new normal, because eventually they will leave the place of self-discovery, whether it is a physical location or a mental state of being, and re-enter the world onto a market where they will be products again. That market, of course, being the job market primarily, but also the dating market, the housing market, the social standing market. We become products in a lot of different markets. And in pretty much all of those, what we really need to be successful is to be a particular category of predictably pre-packaged product. The great big lie is that the education system is meant to give you a leg up in the job market, but this is a lie. You already do not have a leg up in the job market because you are not a member of the owner class. You might get a leg up over your fellow members of the working class, which already from the very beginning sets up the central challenge of your life as being a constant conflict with people you have much more in common with than the people that you work for. But ultimately that is a lie, and you can see this by the fact that usually at the end of your period of self-discovery early in your life, you still get summed up just like you came out of of school with a series of numbers and short statements so the people who own the world can easily and conveniently assess how valuable you would be to them. This is especially the case for the poor, which the owner class doesn't really want to have to think about that much because there's so many of them and the work they do ultimately generates so little profit. So what we do is, instead of giving them self-discovery, we make sure to really have them meet the specific quality standards and avoid any manufacturing quirks. But if this is how all of education is structured, why do some people get a period of self-discovery at all? I mean, it seems kind of counterintuitive if you want to have like a narrow range of specific products, right? Well, part of this is an element of evolutionary gambling. Even in a society that is entirely rigid and conservative, which our society isn't even all that much, you need innovation. You need people who are able to find new ways of doing things in a better way and also deal with developing new situations, because new situations do be developing. If you think of this from the perspective of the owner class, this period of self-discovery can generate a certain number of out-of-the-box thinkers that can be very useful to you. The out-of-the-box thinkers that do not happen to be useful to you, well, they just sort of fall by the wayside because they cannot thrive in the system that you created. But that is not a cost that you took. This is not a loss that you have to write off somehow. The risk was all completely on them, and their lives are now ruined and completely wasted, but you're fine. But there is another, much more insidious reason why the highly educated worker bees get a small window of self-discovery and an option to be themselves for a while, and it's to placate them. To a lot of people, finding yourself ultimately means getting who you really are out of your system so you can then stop being that and adjust to being a cog in the machine. Become what society considers to be normal. This is a fantastic compromise for the owner class when it realized that, hey, we actually do need a good amount of highly educated workers and a small group of innovators to boot. Growing those kinds of people, of course, breeds a lot of alternative lifestyles because highly educated people are obviously equipped with more intellectual tools to think about their own individuality and how they would like to change their place in the world. Which is a bit of a problem if you need to have a society that maximizes your profit and is thus streamlined in a way that is predictable to what life path all people are going to take. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that there is a series of societal pressures associated with the concept of growing up, which is a complete fiction outside of some very basic biological processes. You need these people to reintegrate into society in a way that does not suit them, but you. And because rejection from society means destruction of your life, you need to set up a series of specific milestones that need to be met in order to become accepted as a full member of society. Marry one other person, preferably of the opposite biological sex, purchase a house with that person, then in that house create 1.5 new small humans, work the 9 to 5, pay the 401k, die. There are certain deviations from this path depending on, whether certain subsets of the owner class need their individual worker bees to work a bit different than the others, but overall it follows the same pattern. And if you think being a teenager was peer pressure, this is a million times worse, because as a teenager, and this is true, literally nothing you do matters. Everything you do is completely irrelevant. But if you're an adult, you can fuck up your life forever very easily if you step out of line in a certain particular set of rules, because that's just how the system is set up. And if you ever get sad about this because you wanted something else for yourself in your one life, you'll always be able to content yourself with the fact that you had a very brief window of time back when you didn't truly understand yourself where you could have theoretically been yourself. The thing is, if you really are different, you will come to resent this new normal that you have to stay adapted to, because it turns out that 5 years out of 80 years where you can be yourself is a shit ratio. Why do you think so many adults are so incredibly unhappy and wish they could be young again, back at uni? It's not just that things were simpler back then, because let's be honest, they really weren't. The problems they were dealing with were just different problems. The main reason is that they didn't have to constantly mask their real selves from their community's equivalent to the white picket fence is. It's depressing. It eats you up from the inside to not be able to live an authentic life of who you really are. And this happens whether or not you've coped yourself into believing that you actually do want to desperately chase these arbitrary criteria set for you by other people so you can exist in a way that is convenient to them. The struggle to make certain alternative lifestyles that sort of deviate from the norm a little bit acceptable in society has been enormous, and they all have one thing in common whenever they succeeded in being normalized. They don't cut into the bottom line of the owner class. You want to actually marry someone of the same gender as you? Well, you know, you might not be able to replenish the workforce, but I mean, kinda there's too many people for us owner class people anyway, so that's not a big deal, maybe. And also, there will be no paternity leave, because we will do everything in our power to ensure you cannot adopt children. Excuse me, is that a whole group of people living in the same house and like sharing finances in a sort of familial relationship while not being, you know, blood related with each other? That looks a whole lot like mutual aid to me. Of course, all the phenomena described in this video are a little bit more complex and interlinked and wide-reaching and existing alongside other phenomena than they have been simplified to. But that is, of course, the nature of trying to talk about things. If you don't simplify them, you will end up with a map as large as the area it represents. But it is curious that society is organized in this way that just so happens to be very convenient to the people who are the most powerful. We pay lip service to this idea of self-discovery and individuality, but we ignore the fact that this is a lifelong, ever-changing process, and the only similarity that it should create in all of the people that come out of it is a certain maturity and tolerance. But we can find self-discovery to a particular period of time when we are the least productive for the wallets of the owner class, and then also only allow a certain narrow set of outcomes. Until the point when we are old, when we are no longer contributing to the wallets of the owner class, it becomes acceptable again to be ourselves for some strange reason. Make of that what you will, but I find it to be a rather curious observation. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection. And in that spirit, I really want to end this video with a platitude and say, be yourself, because unless you're a serial killer or something ethically and morally equivalent to a serial killer, you are okay. And see you around, cunts.